Welcome to the Bite Size Podcast. I'm your host, Lorraine Michaels, former EMT and nursing assistant, now business owner and wild entrepreneur. I walked away from over 15 years in medicine to pursue my passion and my God-given talents. Now, I get the honor of helping other women discover their passions and purpose. If you're feeling stuck in life, unsure where to go or what to do, welcome. If you're exactly where you want to be, great, you're welcome here too. If you have faced any kind of hardship or setback, you have found a safe place here. In other words, no matter who you are, or what you've been through, or what you're going through, this is the space for you. On the Bite Size Podcast, we'll discuss life, business, and faith. There's something for everyone. So grab a cup of coffee and something to take notes with, because there will definitely be things you won't want to forget. Welcome back to the Bite Size Podcast. I'm your host, Lorraine Michaels, and today I have the pleasure of talking to not only an amazing wife, an amazing mom, an amazing human, I get to call her my friend. Today, we are talking to Miss Jillian Riddell. She is the host of the Life Without Secrets podcast. She is an amazing writer as well. She has a magazine that's out. And if you are interested in that, make sure to check out our show notes and we will get you all the information for that. But I cannot wait to dive in today to all the things because we literally can talk about anything. Jillian, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, we were talking before and I'm like, what do you want to talk about? We could talk about so many different things and we could probably talk for hours. So this is going to be such a treat.
I know, definitely. We could probably, like I said, we could probably break this up into a few episodes.
All right. Lots of bites.
Yes, right. But I want to dive in. I know we were kind of mentioning hot topics of relationships, but what has been the key ingredient, if you will, with successful relationships in your life?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I think it's really important. And I think it's going to look like a little bit different than for everybody. But one thing I think that we all really could dive into more is building more self-awareness in our life. I think that many times in the world that we live in today, we have a lot of things coming at us, right? Whether it's emails, text messages, like we're always have something coming at us or something needs our time and our attention. And what happens is we are living off of an external world. We're reacting to it, right? And so we're not taking the time to really get quiet and figure out like who we are, how we feel, and what we need. And so my life, it started with a lot of people pleasing. It came from me being a secret in my childhood. My dad hid me as a secret from his family. I didn't know I was a secret until I was about 12. I knew about his family, but they just didn't know about me. And so finding out that you're a secret at 12 years old and then having to be quiet about that secret, it was challenging. And I learned that love was earned and not given. And so what that does is, we play off our external world when we feel that way a lot. And so we're relying on what is outside of us in order to fill the buckets inside of us. And it can be really draining. And, I did the achievements, I looked for love in all the wrong places in the beginning, right? Like, how do I please this guy and not think about myself in that moment in order for him to love me, right? Like, what does he like? And I was really good at assessing people and figuring out, like, how do I get them to like me, But in the meantime, I didn't know who I was, how I felt, or what I needed. And so I didn't do the work actually until probably about 5 years ago when I call it my grief case kind of fell apart. And I think all of us, we carry wounds, big or small, from our childhood. And I call it, they go in our little grief cases. And we carry around these grief cases. And if we don't know how to unpack that grief case throughout our life, and figure out like what to do with those wounds when the drawer opens or what shelf we're going to put them on and like what happens when that drawer opens. What are we going to do about it? And a lot of people, they don't tell us or teach us how to unpack our grief cases.
Yeah.
And what happens is we end up carrying around these grief cases our whole life. And eventually, if we're not careful, those seams will get weaker, and that grief case will come apart.
Yeah.
And what I see people do is sometimes they walk away from it, right? And they start piling on a new grief case, and they never really still didn't unpack it, right? And they go to the next thing in life, which then starts filling their grief case again. They're not unpacking it. But in that moment, we can also decide that, you know what, I'm going to pick up these pieces and I'm going to learn where to put these pieces and what to do when those things hit me again.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably the biggest thing I think people can learn how to do in order to change their life and be successful in relationships. It could be in business, in friendships, in any area of your life. I think it's super important to figure out who you are, how you feel, and what you need.
So you said it was about 5 years ago that you really
Yeah.
started working on that. What happened? What was it that did all your grief cases explode, or was it someone else's healing and unpacking and dealing with their grief case that caused you to be like, "Huh,
Yeah.
I need to do that."
Well, what's interesting is like normally we don't realize it until it hits us in the face sometimes. So I wish I could tell you that like I saw somebody else unpacking their grief case and I was like, I'm going to go do that too. I wish that's how I came across this. And for those listening, like I hope this conversation can help you start unpacking your grief case without having to go through the pain that my relationship went through. My husband and I, we had our own childhood wounds. And when we met, and this often happens, we have similar wounds. And so it almost like attracts us to each other. And we're like, oh my goodness, I see you and you see me because we share in a wound from our childhood. And so we were really close. We could talk about things and we could be like, oh my goodness, I understand you. Right. And like your grief case looks like my grief case, but we didn't know how to unpack it. And so pretty soon, like we just become our own wounds and those seams again get weaker.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what happened to us. So we get in our relationship, feels like a fairy tale, right? I'm like, oh my goodness, somebody understands me. And some people call that trauma bonding. But it can be something smaller too. It doesn't have to be necessarily a trauma bond. It's just something that you relate to. And then pretty soon we become the source of each other's problems because we don't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
And, it sounds very vague, but, it's a deeper wound. And I'll say this because the lens you live your life through matters. What does that mean? Well, from my core wound, because I didn't know how to unpack it, I would assess the world from a lens of, do I matter? And so when we are looking for something, our brain is just a pattern recognition system. Okay. And so I formed a pattern that I don't matter based on my childhood wounds of being a secret. And then finding out that people didn't believe in me until I actually achieved. And then they would want to clap for me, but they weren't there for me in like the dark moments, like finding out you're pregnant when you're 17 years old. And they're like, oh man, you had so much potential. Right. So, those wounds we carry, we see the world from this lens of like, do I matter? And my husband could have done 100 things right. And I would have seen the 2 reasons why I didn't matter to him.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of a relationship, you just try to do the things that so he'll see you, right? Because everybody wants to be seen and heard and loved, right? It's just it's a core need for being a human being. And so I'd live this life of like, okay, I don't matter. Well, what does that do? It puts you in a baseline emotion of resentment, right? Because every day you're like, oh, he tells me I don't matter. Oh, he shows me I don't matter. And so my brain just wants to prove that I'm right. And so this is all I'm seeing.
Hey, it's Lorraine. As you know, it's my joy and passion to teach and encourage others through this podcast, but my heart is actually at live events. Currently, I'm available for booking, so if you're organizing a live event, I'd love to share my story. Your audience will walk away with tangible tools on how to overcome limiting beliefs, break down obstacles, and discover their gifts, talents, and abilities in order to live a life that God created them to live. It's not the size of the audience that's important, it's the connection and impact that I will bring. For more information, email me at lorraine@theboldbeginnings.com.
Yeah. And so pretty soon I am at the point where we don't know how to unpack our grief cases. We're not communicating. We're basically living two separate lives, but in one house. Right. And so like we're doing two circles, his circle and my circle, and we don't have a circle that goes together.
Right.
And so we grow apart, and where, separation is, negativity will follow, and so the negative would fall, the resentment would build. Yeah. And pretty soon I was planning my own exit. I was like, how do I get out of here? How do I escape from this relationship? Because all I knew was that I wasn't happy. I didn't necessarily know exactly the reason why. I didn't know what to do about it. I just knew, like, inside of me, like, I felt unsafe and I needed to leave. And instead of just leaving, I was scared to leave, right? Because also in my core wounds is like, I was raised by a single mom. And so giving my family a family, like where a mom and dad lived in the same home, was really important to me. Yeah. And so I wanted that to work, but I didn't know what to do with these wounds in my grief case. And pretty soon I found myself doing things that were completely out of character for me, which was like looking for love at work, like because somebody there was showing me that I mattered, that was giving me attention. And that led me to basically having this like emotional relationship with somebody else at my job and hiding it. Yeah. And when all this built up and got worse, this all exploded and came out. And it was in that moment, and it's the tornado moment when the grief case comes undone, that we either got to sat there and we get to walk away, or we get to actually go through the grief. Yeah. And in that moment, it wasn't easy, but we did the work. And we went to multiple trauma therapists. We had our own separate trauma therapist. We had a marriage trauma therapist. We had a Christian family therapist. We were paying a mortgage payment in therapy, literally in therapy.
I've been there.
Yes, I mean, and I learned so much, and I learned what works and I learned what didn't. And we also had where I took courses on it as well. Because I was like, you know what, this is a problem, and I don't want to ever care. I don't want this to be a generational thing that passes down to our children. And it will. It absolutely will.
Huge. That is huge awareness right there.
Yeah. And because nobody ever asked me how I felt growing up, it was always it was busy. It was, by the time I was 14, I'd get myself up for school. My mom, she cleaned for a living, bless her soul. She worked really hard. She didn't have a lot. And she had to go to work. And so, by the time I was 14, I was, kind of on my own. Yeah. And, never really feeling like I had that person to ask me how my day was or ask me how I felt about something. It was just not a conversation, because she didn't have that growing up. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want that. And so we've done a lot of work, and, I teach a program now for couples. It's an 8-week course. And it's really just to dive into, we start with like, where are we right now? Because if we want to go somewhere, whether it's in our relationship or our business, we have to understand where we're at. Yeah. And I'm not just saying like, from just like a finance perspective, I mean like on a deeper level that will affect everything else, which is our emotions, which is why I love talking about it. Because we have to be clear on like how we feel in order to get to what we really need. And why is that important? Because if we don't know those answers, our battery is always going to feel empty. We're never going to be working at 100% battery and be at our optimal performance where we can succeed and feel good in our relationships, in our work, and in our lives, and pass that down to our children.
Right. Right.
So the work is worth it. So that, I mean, just to, for my long answer there, that is what happened.
Yeah. That I love that. You explained that so beautifully. I also wanted to touch on how you were saying that you were a secret and what that did to you as a child and adolescent growing up. And I was immediately thinking back to my husband because he also was a secret, and he didn't find out. He found out at an earlier age. I think he was like 5.
Mm-hmm.
But his dad had to keep him a secret, and he also had to deal with and learning how to cope with that of, I exist to you, my dad, but I don't exist to your family,
Mm-hmm.
and what that does to someone. And it's interesting to me that yours was more of a workspace and achievement, and you wanted to achieve so you could feel accepted. And my husband's was, I just want to be seen. I'll do whatever I have to do in order to be seen and accepted, which led to addiction, drugs,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
alcohol, like
Yep.
down a horrible path.
Yeah.
Um, and both, and then when we were talking about the shared wound, although I wasn't like a secret, I had an abandonment
Mm-hmm.
issue. And so did he, because he was abandoned. His mom worked a ton.
Yep.
She was a single mom, so she had to provide. So she was always gone, abandonment. Dad had to be a secret, abandonment. And
Mm-hmm.
so when he and I met, we did see that in each other, like that abandonment wound. And so we did gravitate to each other. And we also had that coming undone moment. Does definitely, I'm not comparing story to story, but in the sense of like our shit unpacked, like
Mm-hmm.
both
Yeah.
of our suitcases
Yep.
exploded, and we had to be like, okay, what are we doing here? We
Yep.
both had a failed marriage before. We don't want to do that again. We
Mm-hmm.
both know we want this stability in this family unit because he has a son, you
Mm-hmm.
know, his mom's out of the picture. So we're also dealing with abandonment wounds in a child that we're
Yep.
trying to raise in a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
So much of this, like, I
Yeah.
resonate so much with it, and I
Yeah.
see it too. And
Mm-hmm.
you are absolutely right. Like, we have to stop this generational curse,
Yep.
and you have to decide it stops with us. So we have to heal so that we could teach this
Yeah.
going forward. It's
100%.
so, so, so important. How do you teach that to your
Yeah.
children, this emotional awareness?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it always starts with us, right? Like we can't teach something that we're not doing ourselves. And
So
I
true.
think number one, we have to get comfortable doing it. Uh,
Mm.
and you could probably relate to this. We can relate on so much, Lauren. Um, being in the ER, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Like you know my life.
Yeah.
I also am an ER nurse, and in the beginning of my career, like I used to feel like I was such a superhero about it because like I'm like nothing really bothers me. Like I can, go from, somebody screaming at me to taking care of this sweet little old lady to having something traumatic happen to a kid, and like I'm okay. And it
Mhm.
was because I was never in touch with my emotion. I was taught to stuff and keep going.
Mm.
And I think that many people, that's what we do, right? We either get anxious or we avoid, a lot of
Mm.
times. And usually, I love in my program, I talk about attachment styles
Mhm.
because usually there's even if you came from the same type of wounds and that's where you found something relatable, kind of like your story and mine, there's
Mhm.
usually one anxious partner, like anxious, and one's avoidant, and they
Mhm.
always find each other, right?
Yeah.
And so and then you get into the crazy cycle, I call it. But anyway, um so for us, I used to think that I was like this superhero and I could just go through anything. I would actually like find it like a badge of honor that I hadn't cried in 10 years. And when we went to therapy, the therapist would actually try to give me homework to cry. And he would be like, okay, watch this movie. And I was like, do you know what I do for a living? Like, that's not going to work, And it's funny because, like, I cry all the time now, like happy, sad, like there'll be tears. And, but I never knew there was something wrong with that. I didn't know that was like, I thought that was like a badge of honor to me. I'm like, I'm just not emotional. Like I stay in my safe zone emotionally. It's like I don't have this high emotion and I also don't have this low emotion. I just stay in the middle. And I thought that's safe to me. And we have to get comfortable with being in every emotion. And how do we do that? Well, I like walking through an exercise with people. And we identify all the stressors in our lives. And we identify what our emotional response is. And then we identify what they do now in response to that stress. So I think a lot of times people will say when they're feeling a negative emotion, they say, I'm just feeling really stressed, right? Like that's like a thing we say in society, right? Like I have a lot of stress. Or, now a word is busy, right? Like I'm just really busy, and if you're somebody that's saying that, or you have this emotion like that you always say, or I'm tired, right? If you're a mom, I get it. But like dig a little bit deeper into that. Like what is causing that? People say it's like their job or they don't have enough time or the traffic they have to sit in or their kids or their relationship are stressing them out. Right? And I think it's really helpful to understand that it's not actually the event, the situation, or the person that is stressing us out. Those are the stressors, but they're not what drains our batteries. What drains our batteries are the negative emotions that are associated with the stressor.
Okay,
so
go deeper on that.
Yeah. So the negative emotion that you feel when you don't have enough time or you don't feel like you have enough time, the negative emotion you feel when, in your relationship, the negative emotion you feel from that job. Those are the things, the emotion about those things, about those stressors is what's stressing you out.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the negative or depleting emotion we experience in response to the event or situation or person, such as anger, frustration, impatience, disappointment, that we call stress that is draining our batteries. So if we didn't experience these type of emotions, we likely wouldn't say we feel stressed or that they're stressing me out. And so if you can just like take a step backwards and see the emotion that you're feeling and not the stressor, not the event, not the person, but the emotion that you're feeling.
Yeah.
Like then we can take more control of how tired we feel, how stressed we feel, and how busy we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like to walk people through an exercise, and we can do it right now if you want.
Yeah.
Get a piece of paper out, and I want you to have 3 columns. The first one is going to be the stressors that we're going to list. In the second column, you're going to put the emotional response to the stressor. And then in the third column, you're going to do what you do now in response to the stressor. So stressors are things like workload, could be the money to pay bills, your finances. It could be job security. It could be your teenager, your child. It could be a lack of time. It could be the housework that you need to do today, your relationship, your to-do list that is always seeming so long, your computer problems or technology. whatever it is that is a stressor in your life, okay, that you would say is causing you to be stressed. Like, I want you to just take a moment to just write down whatever comes to your mind, right? Like, some examples for me would be like workload, finances, time, housework. Those are some of mine. Okay. And then for the next column under emotional response, this is where I want you to pause, and I want you to either, you can go to the magazine that Lorraine talked about that is in the show notes. In the back of the magazine is like a heart shape with a bunch of different emotions in it. Or you could just go on Google and type in 100 list of emotions. And I want you to have that in front of you every single time you do this exercise. Because the biggest part about this is to be able to identify the emotion that you're experiencing without saying that you feel stressed, busy, or tired, because that's how you've been responding to things. So we need to be able to be more self-aware and identify the emotion, because if we don't know how we feel, we don't know what to do about it.
So good.
Yeah, if we don't know how we feel, we don't know what to do about it. So we need to be more specific, right? What is that stressor? What emotion is it causing you? Like, be very clear about it. So go to that 100 list of emotions if you need to, read them and figure out, like, how do I really feel? And so for me, it was like, my workload makes me feel overwhelmed. My finance gives me a little bit of anxiety. The lack of time makes me worried. My housework makes me feel overwhelmed. And you could keep doing this. And this is really good. I do this in my relationship course because number one, it is good for each of you to figure out what the stressors are in your life. And number two, it gives the other person a look into what's going on inside of you. Okay. And so there's a level of compassion that's built from that. And I'm just going to show, does this on video as well?
Yeah.
Like, okay. So I'm going to hold up, if you're on audio, these are in July, my husband and I, we do this exercise a lot, but we were doing clarity sessions, and we always start with this. Because we need to dump out in order to get creative and solve problems, right? So this is always the first thing we do, is we go through this exercise that we're talking about. And so we did our emotional response. Before I show you guys, I want you to go to the third one though, and I want you to write down, what do you do now in response to the stressor or the way you feel? And so it could be push through, I complain, I just rehash it in my mind. I avoid, I withdraw. It's a slow burn for me, or I get a second job. You're like, what do you do in response to the stressor, each stressor? So go down your list, and next to, in each column, you're going to write what that stressor is causing you. So, for workload, my emotional response was overwhelmed. And what do I do now? I just push through, like that is something I do, right? So, and I want to remind people, this is not a time to judge yourself. This is time for awareness. This is non-judgmental. This is just like, be honest with yourself. Like, the more truthful we are about things, the more results we're going to get in the end. Because we have to figure out where we are right now in order to get to where we want to go.
Absolutely.
You can't lie to your GPS and tell them you're at Disneyland when you're at home. It knows you're not there. Yeah. And same thing with your body. It knows. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So once you've done that, if you have a spouse or a partner, I want you to share them with each other. And I think this is really an interesting thing because so I want to show you. So my husband's, I'm just showing everybody online if you guys are on here. This is my husband's last month. It has about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things on it. Okay. And he's a guy, he's simple, right? And mine has about 30. It's like a front and back of a piece of paper. Okay. Like, this is all the things I have on my brain that were, and he's like, why are you so tired all the time? I'm like, oh, And,
Here.
yeah, let me show you.
Yeah.
And it builds awareness. And then, it also did for him is go, oh, you know what? Yeah, that really stresses me out too.
Yeah.
And so he added some things to his list
Yeah.
afterwards because he's like, oh yeah, I totally feel that too. But it was being able to identify like compassion for each other, how
Mm.
each other was really feeling, because you're listing emotions that you probably didn't tell your husband how you felt because all you did was say you're too tired or you're too busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, now you can look at their piece of paper and go, wow, you've been feeling really overwhelmed lately.
Yeah.
And then there's a conversation there to be had of like getting interested in each other and yourself, and like asking yourself the question, like, yeah, if this is how I really feel, have I ever felt this way before? Like, why did I feel that way, and
Yeah.
is it related to something in my past?
Right. Right.
And these things are so important to just build the self-awareness
Mm.
of where we are right now, and why do we feel this way, and where do we want to go, and how do we get there. So
Yeah.
this is like a huge exercise I encourage all of the couples. Like, we literally start here because I'm like, we got to figure out where we're at. And most people have no clue,
Yeah.
is what I find.
Yeah. No,
They've never
absolutely.
done something like this. And so
Yeah.
I think it's so important. But number two, we don't leave you there either. So we might start with the stressors, but we're always going to teach you how to get to the positives. And
Yeah.
so the next thing that I teach in the exercise is we go to the renewal. Okay. So I call this our emotional playlist. It's the playlist like that you turn on in your car when you're like, I really need some energy. And like, or that playlist, like when you first got your license and you jump in your car all by yourself and you turn up your music and roll down your windows and you're like, life is so good. Freedom. Right? Like, we are going to create that list for you, but
Yeah.
not for just songs. Like, music can totally be on your list, by
Mm.
the way.
Mm.
But these are the things that like renew your energy in life. Like,
Mm.
what are the situations, interactions, events that just totally give you energy and make you
Yeah.
feel like uplifted, renewed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, like, working out, like, let me just tell you, like, getting to the workout, I do not feel this way. Okay. I'm a normal human being. Okay. I don't always feel motivated to work out, but let me tell you, afterwards, I feel proud. I feel productive. I feel more confident.
Yeah.
And so this is number one on the list that I created. This was the first thing I thought of. And so I want you to make two columns for this. And the first one is the situation or event that causes you to have more renewed emotions. And then the second column is just the emotional response. So, what is the emotion? And again, I'm going to have you go back to those list of emotions because it's so important to be very clear on how you feel. So, write down the situations in your life that have made you feel so good. Is it going for a hike in nature? Is it hanging with a fun group of women at an event? That totally uplifts me. Is it getting a cup of coffee with a friend and just being
Mm.
able to dive deep into your conversation and feel like someone saw you that day? And what does that make you feel? Does it make you feel connected? Does it make you feel relaxed? Going for a walk in nature, do you feel calm? Do you feel peace? And is it going out on stage and you feel excited? Like, what are those things? And, I want you to know, fear is really excitement without breathing.
Hmm.
Okay. So, like, when you have that negative emotion, there is an ability, and I teach this too, but there is an ability to rewire your nervous system
Mm-hmm.
and experience a different emotion, even though your heart might be racing,
Mm.
right? Like, positive emotions don't have to be calm, peace. And I think, like, we talk a lot about nervous system regulation, but you don't have to be in a mode of like peace and calm in order to have renewed energy. You
Mm-hmm.
can be excited and confident, and your heart
Yeah.
can be racing, and you can still be filling up your cup.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just, I like to remind people of that.
Yeah.
So why is this list important? Well, this is important because it builds your resilience. It increases the energy you have in your battery.
Mm.
And so a lot of times, like when I talk to groups and stuff, I ask them like, what does resilience mean to you? And many people will say, oh, it means to like be strong and push through and, build your resilience, like get through hard times. And I'm like, well, what if I have another definition for you? So, the Heart Math Institute, which does a lot of research on neurocardiology, how the brain and the heart are connected.
Mm.
And they define resilience as the capacity to prepare for, recover from, and adapt in the face of stress, challenge, or adversity. So we can really think of it as the amount of energy we have stored in our inner batteries, the amount of energy you have to use not only physically, but mentally and emotionally.
Mm.
And the biggest way we can do this is by using our emotional playlist,
Yeah.
because our primary or the biggest energy drainers are emotions.
Yeah.
But the good part is the biggest energy fillers are
Are
also
also emotions.
emotions.
Yep. Absolutely.
So becoming aware of these two things literally impact every area of your life and how you show up to your
Absolutely.
business, to your relationships. Um, and, a lot of people will say, like, control your thoughts, control your life type of situation.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell you, I disagree.
Mm.
I know like everybody says it, and I'm like, sorry, but like research shows when you actually study the heart and the brain, the heart sends more messages to the brain than the brain sends to the heart.
Mm.
So you're based on the emotion that you feel from a situation, and your body knows, you will develop a heart rhythm. And we hear a lot about heart rate variability. You'll
Mm-hmm.
develop a heart rhythm. That heart rhythm will be sent to your brain for your brain to interpret, which tells your body every other signal to that it creates, right?
Right. Right.
And so negative emotions have a chaotic rhythm. They create chaotic rhythms in the heart. And there's
Mm.
monitors. I have one.
Mm-hmm.
I can hook you up and show you. It creates chaotic rhythms where when you're in a positive state, when your emotions are positive, the rhythm is much more
Yeah.
wave like,
Right. Right. Right.
rhythmic. And so when that gets sent to your brain knows what to do with it because it's calm, it's smooth, and it's able to, send the right signals. When it's
Yeah.
chaotic, it has to figure out like, oh man, how am I supposed to react to this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than we're responding,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so like there's and our emotions will come, and that will determine how we think about certain things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you change your baseline emotion, which if you go back to your stressors and your emotional playlist, like my question for you is like if you were to be really honest and you were to dump on all these different things right now, do you think you're going to be in more of the negative or more of the positive?
Mm.
And take note of that. And
Yeah.
then, use your emotional playlist to get you on the
The
positive
right
side of the
side.
grid.
Yeah.
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 I love this. This is so eye-opening because it's so simple. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And I
So
think
simple.
so much of society today is just very reactionary.
Very.
And instead
Mhm.
of like taking the time to pause and slow down and really think about what is going on within them, they're just reacting, just
Mhm.
impulsive reacting. When you this is so simple. And if
Mhm.
you can break it down and take the time to sit down and go through this with I mean, you could do this with your kids,
Yeah.
but it's so eye-opening and it's so like it brings that awareness and understanding. And then you know what to do. It's so simple to change it. And I
Yeah.
agree with you about the whole thought situation. Like, you can't control your thoughts. Your thoughts are going to show up, but you
Mhm.
can control how you respond to them and what you do. And if
Well,
you
and
have
I'll
this information, it's
mhm.
so empowering.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, your emotions will lead to your thought. So if you're in a negative emotion, your thoughts are going to be negative.
Mhm.
If you are living in more of a positive emotion, you're going to have more positive thoughts, And
Absolutely.
going back to what you said about children, this is absolutely so good to do with kids, and you don't have to have them write it down. But like at the dinner table, right? Like, what is was there anything that stressed you out, or you could use an emotion? Did anything make you feel frustrated today or
Mm.
overwhelmed? Or you look at those emotions that you felt and relate to your child. Like, was there something that really made you feel anxiety today, or you know put you like scared in your body? What
Mm.
was it? And then what did you do when that happened?
Yeah.
And then you can teach them, like, oh, when that happens to me, I like to just like pause and take some really big, deep breaths. And then I feel better and I can take a pause and then respond better. Like, that's what I do. Or, right, opposite is, what was the best thing about your day? And if you can, if they're old enough, you can have them write it down. Like, how did you feel? Like, I
Yeah.
felt excited, or I felt confident when I made those goals. Like, letting them have a piece of paper, and you can Google that too.
Yeah.
Kids list of emotions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And something they'll understand. And there's ones with like faces, so the
Mhm.
kid, if they're really little, they can like look at the face and then find a word under that face that like matches how they feel.
Yeah.
And this just, it opens up the conversation, and then what's kind of going on in their life and where they're at.
Yeah.
And how do we create that emotional playlist? And then it's like, when they lost the next soccer game, like, it's like, you can remind them, like, that happens, and remember how you felt, when you made that goal. Like, take some deep breaths and put yourself in that position again,
Yeah.
you know, like, put yourself in that moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like watch their whole body change.
Yeah, their whole countenance will change. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
I love that. Man, you unpacked so much.
I know. I told you, I'm like, we could literally talk forever.
I know.
We could just keep going.
Gosh, dang, I know. Um, we'll have to save that for another one. Jillian, thank you so much for your emotional intelligence and sharing with us what you have learned and gained and how you're showing up in the world and how you're helping others. Um, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for you, for our friendship, for how
Mm.
you're helping other people in relationships. And I just I'm grateful. I'm very, very grateful for you.
Well, I'm
So,
super grateful too. And you have to come back and visit me so we can go for another hike soon.
I know. I will. I don't know when I'll get to California, but it'll be soon.
Right? I hope so. Well, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. We will definitely have you back on and we can go deeper into other things because I absolutely love the heart mapping and all of I just love
Yes.
that, the brain and the heart. Ooh, I could go
Yep.
forever on
So
that.
me too.
Oh man. Okay, friends, if you have found this episode to have been helpful, if you want to learn more about Jillian and what she does, find her magazine or take her course. You can absolutely find that in the show notes. We'll attach it. Where's the best place to get in contact with you, Jill?
I'd probably say Instagram. Just Life Without Secrets podcast is my handle, but don't just follow me, like DM me, because it's like, I feel like oftentimes, I'll get like a friend request, but then I have no idea where they came from, or like, I'm like, just send me a message and tell me you heard me on Lorraine's podcast or something,
Yeah,
so we can connect.
absolutely. We love that.
Yeah.
We love being able to connect and um, put a face to the name and figure out, like,
Mhm.
how did you find me? That always helps us.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, friends. Well, until next time, remember you are divinely created for a divine purpose, and there is no mistake in you.